I'm afraid 2022 is going to be a somewhat sad year for the car enthusiast, as the C63 we know and love is being hammered by emissions regulations, and will now have to put up with just a 4-cylinder engine. That's right folks, no more is the V8. But I thought, instead of feeling sad that it's gone, let's appreciate what's already happened and have a look and a listen to a dying breed. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Now we've had a listen, let's have a look. But before we start, please like, subscribe and hit the bell if you'd like us to keep making this content. Now, this particular C63 is the S variant, meaning there's a jump in power over the standard car. 510 bhp to be exact, and a frankly ridiculous 700 Nm of torque. Easy to see why it lights up the rear tyres so easily then. 0 to 60 should be dealt with in just 3.9 seconds, more like 4.5 on a day like today, but let's see how this heifer does on the 30 to 70 sprint. Finally, the Cupra has been knocked from first place. The C63 managed a time of just 3.41 seconds, which is indeed fast, but on a better day with more traction, I reckon it could dip into the 2s. Nonetheless, an impressive time. Inside, you'll find a fine leather and carbon wrapped C-Class that perfectly reflects this car's personality. Extravagant, opulent, and just a little bit rude. The seats are the rude part. They adjust every which way, but are fundamentally racy compared to a regular C-Class. There is no denying though, they do look the part. The dash may not have the latest digital screens, but the quality is there, and so is the heads-up display. This is an optional extra, but it's well worth having. High gloss carbon fibre and the optional IWC clock covers the centre of the dash, and it really does make the car special to sit in. What doesn't feel special to sit in is the rear seats. Legroom / headroom are just subpar compared to the BMW M4, but thankfully there is just enough space for the odd short journey. The boot tells a similar story as it's smaller than its rivals by over 50 litres. Having said that, there's still enough for 2 big suitcases and a duffel bag, so not the end of the world. Plus, of course, you can fold the seats down, which gives you almost all the space you'd ever need anyway. Right, let's get on the road and see how she does. So, what is a 510 horsepower Mercedes C63 like to drive on British roads? Well, the initial impression you get is it doesn't really feel that different to a normal C-Class. The only big thing you notice is, of course, the engine. There's just a constant rumble of that V8 motor. And then, of course, you've got the suspension, which, in its comfort setting now, feels pretty similar to a AMG line Mercedes C250 diesel. Stiff but controlled. But back to the engine, as this is an absolute masterpiece. As you know, these are hand-built by individual people at AMG, and I have to thank them for their work, as you get the whole 700 Newton meters of torque from under 1500 RPM in this engine. That combined with a very nippy 7-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox makes this really easy to drive around town. You'd never really get tired of commuting to work in this car, even with these pretty firm bucket seats. Then in terms of parking, the only major difference for this C63 is just the wide arches at the rear. You do have to watch out for them a little bit, especially when you're going through width restrictors. Thankfully, this is a pretty high-spec car, so we've got an overhead camera as well as a reverse camera, and of course there's then front and rear parking sensors. Turning circle is good, so as you can see we managed to get into a space in one go very easily. Coming out of junctions is where you feel the torque of that engine. Just a tiny bit of throttle and the car will actually move sideways a bit. And remember, we're still in comfort mode. Okay, let's reset the trip computer and see what MPG we can get on the motorway. You might think it's kind of a pointless test for this car, but the less times you have to fill up, the better really. Before we get on the motorway, let's see how this Mercedes C63S handles a roundabout. So I'm going to put the car into Sports Plus. This will sharpen up the throttle, sharpen up the steering, give me some pops and bangs from the exhaust, and most importantly, it will relax the traction. Only a little bit though. It holds you back quite a lot more than BMW M4 does, which isn't really a bad thing, to be honest. Especially if you're an inexperienced driver like me. For now though, we're going to chill out and talk about some of the other features that this car has. On the motorway then, what is this C63 like? Well, it's fairly comfortable. I have to say the seats are harder than a normal C-Class, but you could just about do a long journey in them without getting too sore. Road noise and wind noise are also pretty good. The wind noise, of course, is exactly the same as any other C-Class coupe, so very good. The road noise, however, is a little bit worse as the suspension and the tyres are just a little bit more connected to the chassis. Visibility is also very good. Being a coupe, the B-pillar is much further back, and it just means looking over your shoulder into your blind spot is made pretty easy. Plus, like pretty much every other German car, you get that little bit of curved glass in the wing mirror, so you pretty much never have to look over your shoulder to check your blind spot. Then in terms of other comfort features, you've got your normal cruise control. This one doesn't have the radar guidance thing, which is a bit of a shame, but normal cruise control is still appreciated. Then you've got a sunglasses holder, which not a lot of cars have these days, and it is very useful. Then you've got some pretty good cup holders down here, which you can actually cover up with this little carbon fibre cover. And the reason these are so good is because you've got little grippy bits so you can hold small or large drinks, and then you can actually remove the cup holders as well. So if you have a spill, you can take them out, clean it up and put them back in. Then behind them there's like a little place for your phone to go in, which I think you can get a wireless charger for, but this particular car doesn't have it. Then if I could only have 3 specs in this car, the first thing would be that heads-up display. If I crouch down, you might be able to see it, and it just looks absolutely magnificent. It gives you a rev counter, your gear, your speed. Then if you set a destination in your navigation, it shows like an actual map on the heads-up display as well. And that means not only is it like a party trick, it's actually quite useful in day-to-day life as well. Then the next thing would be this Burmester sound system. Standard sound system is good, as I've said in previous videos, but the Burmester system, whilst it only has a little bit more volume, it has so much more clarity. The bass, the mids and the highs just have a lot more oomph to them, and you can really separate the music you're listening to. And the last spec I'd get is actually the panoramic roof. It's really good in this car, it's absolutely massive. And of course, when you open it like this, you can just tilt it and it lets more of that exhaust noise in, which is kind of the point of this car. It's pretty much all about the engine, really. And not only that, it lets a lot more light into the cabin, so if you do have rear passengers, at least they won't be getting too sick sitting in the back. Now, let's go through bad things, and the only real bad thing about this car is the seating position. Sadly, although these seats are very racy, and they feel very racy, they just don't get low enough in the car. If you get in a BMW M4, then you get into this, you feel like you're sitting way too high up. And I'm only 5'11", and my head is really not that far from the ceiling. I've only got about 1.5 inches of space, and it just makes you feel slightly less connected with the car. So hopefully in the new C63, even though it's a 2-litre engine, yes I know, RIP, hopefully they've nailed the driving dynamics a little bit better. But other than that, this car is pretty much as good as you're going to get for a sports coupe. Right, let's do a couple more miles on the motorway to see what our final MPG figure is. So far we're averaging nearly 29 MPG, which is actually not that bad. Motorway journey over, and we managed over 30 miles per gallon in a 4-litre V8. So if you're doing a long journey, I mean, realistically, you can get nearly 400 miles out of a tank in this car. Pretty impressive for such a big engine. Just for reference, the BMW M4 only got 4 MPG more than this. The king, though, was that Audi RS5. That managed to get over 40 MPG on the same bit of road. So if you're doing a lot of long journeys, the Audi RS5 is certainly the one to go for. But this car has a little bit more soul than that. Let's go do some driving and see if it's worth it. Before we go down a smaller B road, let's have a look at the handling of this car around a tighter roundabout. Now I've got the car in race, so it'll let you have a little bit of slip, a little bit of fun. But to be fair, it doesn't really do much more than a normal C-Class does. The BMW M4 is very leery and will basically let you crash into a tree backwards. Whereas this, in a fairly similar handling mode, we're in race with the ESP in Sport, it just kind of lets you move the rear end about a little bit. But as I said earlier, it's actually pretty good for drivers that aren't that confident, or drivers that are not used to 510 horsepower. And the thing is, if you do want to turn the ESP off, you can actually turn it all the way off in this car. Okay, back at our favourite B road. I've just opened the panoramic roof a little bit so we can get a little bit more noise. We're in race, still with ESP in Sport, so I can show you what this car's like on a tighter road. This is where just having a little bit of slip is kind of more fun than the M4. The M4 can be a little bit too scary sometimes, especially if you've got cars coming the other way. The only thing you have to watch in this is your speed. But compared to the old C63, this chassis is just so much better. It's just tighter, you know what it's doing. Just enables you to have a little bit more fun with it without losing any kind of confidence. It's still a B-road bruiser though. Can't deny the sound is immaculate. Some other technical things then. Steering is, it's okay, it doesn't have so much feel to it, but it gets the job done. You know where the front wheels are, you know what they're doing. And the suspension, whilst it's stiff, it does do a very good job of rounding off the bumps still. I have to say, for a car with this much power, it's much more approachable than I thought it was going to be. Especially on some tighter roads like this. And that sound. Feels like you're driving Thor's hammer. I have to say though, for a big power car, it's pretty approachable. Just makes you laugh. That's what all these kind of cars are about, really. Just having a little bit of fun. And the thing is, this car does teach you throttle control pretty well. You don't have to turn everything off to have a little bit of fun in this car. And a sign of a good car is being able to have fun in it when you're driving slowly. And because of this engine, you're going to be having fun going 2 miles an hour. So, this is it. The last V8 C-Class. And what a car it is. Thinking about it, the lifespan of the combustion engine has been infinitesimally small when compared to the human race's existence. So, instead of being sad, I think we should be happy that all of us got to experience an engine as good as this. As always, I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like, and why not subscribe? As not only can you see more content like this, you can also see everything we have for sale. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.